Clara had learned long ago that mirrors were not her friends. Some girls were born with soft curls, sparkling eyes, and the kind of glow that made strangers smile at them in the streets. She wasn't one of those girls. The townspeople didn't hesitate to remind her of it either, sometimes with words, sometimes with looks, and sometimes with the kind of silence that cut deeper than insults. Working at Miller's General Store, she spent most of her days stocking shelves with her head down, avoiding people's eyes as much as possible. She'd grown used to being invisible, or worse, being noticed only so. Someone could tell her something was off. Her clothes were plain, her hair always tied back, and her voice so soft that people often asked her to repeat herself. But she never complained. Life had taught her that the quiet survival of unnoticed people came from not disturbing the world around them, and that's all she did, survive. It was a particularly windy afternoon when the door of the store creaked open and a tall cowboy stepped inside. He was broad-shouldered, sun-darkened, and carried the air of a man who lived more among horses than humans. His name, as Clara later learned, was Sawyer Kane, owner of the Broken Arrow ranch, and known around town for being hard-working, distant, and nearly impossible to impress. People said he only came to town when absolutely necessary, so when he walked straight toward Clara, she assumed something must be wrong. He held a small paper list in his hand and cleared his throat, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. "Ma'am," he said politely, "I'm looking for someone who can help me gather what's on this." He wasn't unkind. He wasn't impatient. He didn't stare at her the way most people did, trying to figure out what was wrong with her. He simply spoke to her, like she mattered. Clara blinked, startled. "Yes, I can help." Her voice cracked and she hated herself for it. As they walked through the aisles, she pointed out the items on his list: feed supplements, rope lantern oil, tobacco leaves for an old ranch hand. She braced herself for the moment he would start looking at her more closely, the way men sometimes did, searching for beauty that wasn't there. But he didn't. Sawyer talked about ranch work, about a troublesome horse that kept chewing through fences, about a neighbor boy who wanted to become a bull rider despite having no balance at all. Clara found herself smiling, actually smiling at his stories. She didn't realize she had relaxed until she caught herself standing a little straighter. When Sawyer handed her the money, his fingers brushed hers gently. She flinched, instantly pulling her hand back, cheeks burning. His brows rose. "You okay, ma'am?" She nodded quickly, staring at the counter. This was always the moment things got ruined, when people noticed her awkwardness, her shyness, the strange, unexplainable fear of being seen. Sawyer didn't push. He simply tipped his hat slightly and said, "Thank you kindly," before heading out. Clara didn't expect to see him again anytime soon. Yet the next week he returned. He didn't have a list this time, just a slow, thoughtful expression as he leaned against the counter. "Forgot some things," he said. But Clara noticed his bag already looked full. Something inside her suspected he hadn't forgotten anything at all. But she didn't dare assume. She helped him anyway, keeping her eyes down, her voice soft. When he asked her how her week had been, she almost looked behind her to see if he was talking to someone else. No one asked about her week. No one cared. "It was fine," she whispered. "Busy?" He smiled slightly. "Busy's good. Means you're moving forward." From that day on, he came to the store almost every week. Sometimes he bought essentials, sometimes nonsense. Once he bought half a dozen pencils, though he claimed he hardly wrote anything. Clara suspected he simply needed an excuse to talk. But why her? She was ordinary, quiet, invisible. She had nothing to catch a man's attention, especially a man like him. Then the day came when a group of girls entered the store. Girls Clara had grown up with, girls who used to whisper mean things about her in school. They walked past Sawyer with flirtatious smiles, tossing their glossy hair, batting their perfect eyelashes. Clara shrank behind the counter, hoping they wouldn't notice her. But of course they did. "Oh, look," one of them said loudly. Clara still hiding behind shelves. Their laughter echoed through the store. Clara felt the familiar burn of humiliation crawling into her chest. Sawyer's expression hardened, but he didn't say anything until the girls left. When he finally turned to Clara, she expected pity, or worse, discomfort. Instead, he asked gently, "Why'd you shrink like that?" She trembled, unable to look at him. "Because I'm not pretty," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never have been, and people don't let me forget it." For the first time since she'd met him, Sawyer walked closer, slow, steady, like approaching a frightened horse he didn't want to spook. He placed his gloved hand near hers, not touching, just offering presence. She finally raised her eyes, tears clinging to her lashes. Sawyer's voice was low, steady, and full of something she had never heard aimed at her before: respect. "That's fine," he said quietly, "'cause I ain't looking for pretty. I need honest, not fancy." The words struck her harder than any insult ever. And because they were unfamiliar. Kindness, sincerity, acceptance. She didn't know what to do with those things. Clara blinked rapidly, pulling her hand back, the world tilting slightly, because no one had ever spoken to her like that. Not in her whole life. And just like that, everything began to change. Sawyer's words haunted Clara for days, not in a painful way, but in the way sunlight lingers on your skin long after you've stepped indoors. "I need honest, not fancy." Had anyone ever needed her for anything? Had anyone ever valued something other than the face she didn't have? She didn't dare believe it. People changed their minds. People pretended kindness for convenience. But Sawyer, he kept showing up. Week after week, talking with her, asking her things no one bothered to ask, her thoughts about books she read, how she fixed broken items at the store so cleverly, whether she'd ever gone beyond the town's borders. "Every time," Clara answered cautiously, like a bird testing if a hand was safe. And every time, Sawyer listened like her words were worth more than gold. The town soon noticed Sawyer's regular visits. Gossip spread like wildfire. "Why would a rancher like him waste time on her?" they whispered. Clara heard the comments, though Sawyer pretended not to. She wanted to tell him to stop coming, to save him from the judgment that followed her like a shadow. But every time she opened her mouth to discourage him, he said something simple and grounded that made her swallow her fears. "People talk," he said once, tightening the strap of his saddlebag. "But talk ain't truth." Another time, "Someone else's opinion ain't never fed me, paid my bills, or fixed my fence." She realized he lived his life by his own compass, steady, unshakable, and somehow he had room in that world for her. One late afternoon, Sawyer arrived looking more tired than usual. He placed his hat on the counter, rubbing the back of his neck. "Long week?" Clara asked softly. He chuckled. "Long month." He explained that one of his ranch hands was leaving, and he needed someone trustworthy to help with books, inventory, and small tasks. Clara's heart tightened. She wished she could help, but she knew she wasn't capable of ranch work. But then Sawyer looked up at her with an expression she couldn't read, half hope, half something deeper. "You ever think about working somewhere quieter than this store?" he asked. Clara blinked. "Like where?" He held her gaze. "Like my ranch." Her breath caught. "Me," she whispered. "Why me?" Sawyer rested his elbows on the counter, leaning slightly closer. "Because you don't lie, you don't pretend. And you've got a careful eye, you see things others." "Miss," Clara felt her face flush. No one had ever described her like that. Even if she believed him, how could she fit into his world? "But I don't know anything about ranches," Sawyer shrugged. "Then I'll teach you. I'm not strong," she added. "Strength ain't always muscles," he replied. "Sometimes it's getting up when folks try to push you down." Clara looked away, tears gathering. She didn't know how to accept a life-changing opportunity. It felt too big, too bright for someone who had lived in the shadows. "Think about it," Sawyer said gently. "No rush." But the truth was she wanted to say yes. She wanted to step out of the life that had caged her for so long.